Now open your Bibles and let's read the first 5 verses, 2 Timothy chapter 3. Now notice some changes that I'm making. Folks, we're going to make a study of some words today, or the beginning of a study of 18 words in verses 2 through 4. 15 adjectives, 2 nouns, and the verb, all descriptive of the last days. Now, when I say we're going to do a word study, I mean just that. We're going to do a word study. I've done my best over the last several days to dig into each one of these words and to get the most out of it I could possibly get. So let's read verses 1 through 5. But this you be recognizing. In the final days, difficult times shall be present. Now today, our study, verses 2 through 4. For the people, notice I said people rather than men. And I'll tell you why as we make a word study this morning. For the people shall be self-lovers. Notice this. Money lovers, boasters, arrogant, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, without natural affection, or devoid of instinctive affections. I'm elaborating now for a moment. Slanderers, without self-control, untamed, not lovers of good, traitors, reckless, high-minded. Now there is the verb, and it's used as a participle here. High-minded, we'll let that go for the time being till we get into the word. Pleasure lovers more than God lovers. Now let's read verse 5 to complete this long verse, this long sentence. Having a form of piety, but who have denied the power of it, you be turning yourself away from these. Boy. Anybody can read, can understand that. Are we living in the last days? No, let's put it like this. Not going back and rehashing what we gave last Sunday. We're living in the final days of the last days. In the final days of the last days. And I'm no date setter. And you're not going to hear me set one. Paul describes, beginning with verse 2, the manner of life manifested by apostates. And we have 18 words. Hopefully, folks, you want to make a real study of this. And I'm going to expose you to as much as I possibly can this morning. And if I do not complete it this morning, I will finish next Lord's Day. So let's begin now with verse 2. Take it slow. 18 words, 15 adjectives, 2 nouns, and the verb used as a participle. But let me also hasten to say this. They are all in the nominative case. That's the designation case. That's the subject case. I said they're all in the nominative case. Many of them are compound words. Some of them are made up of 3 different Greek words. Therefore, in order to really understand the meaning of the word as we would like, we have to go into all of those words and then put it together. All the different parts and put it together. So Paul describes the apostate's manner of life which manifested their depravity, the heinousness of their sins. Sin which is getting worse and worse and worse. So let's see how he begins in verse 2. You've got to go back and realize that we have the future middle indicative verb to close the last part of the first verse. So now he says, for the people, anthropoi, but anthropoi, the plural of anthropos, is used generically. Not just talking about men alone, but it is used generically. Speaking of mankind or speaking of all people, generally speaking. So we need to have that understanding to begin with. So we have a future middle indicative of the verb I, me, to close the first verse. To be, to exist, to happen, or to take place. And now he says, for since then, and since this is true, what do we have? First of all, the first adjective that Paul uses is philautoi. Compound word, compound adjective. Made up of philis. We've already studied philis. We did this 2 weeks ago today. And agape or agapao, the verb or the noun. Here we have philis or philotas. Philotas. Philos and otas. And otas means self or oneself. So what do we have? Self-love. Now notice, self-love is the very first one. So he started correctly. Self-love in this verse is that narrow, wicked affection which confines an individual to his personal good on earth under the garb of religion. Now notice what I said, under the garb of religion. Verse 5, having a form of piety, but denying, devoid, if you please, of the power of Christianity. Isn't that true today? Isn't that true? I hope it's not true of anyone who's a member of this assembly. So to love oneself is the opposite of loving God. And we'll conclude with that in the 4th verse. The self-lover thinks he is equal to God. All you have to do is listen to people today. They think they're equal to God. Self-love is the cause of all the other enormities that are given in this passage of Scripture that we're studying. All the heinous sins that follows, they begin with self-love. Unless grace enters one's life, all his ignorance is knowledge. All of his folly is wisdom. And all of his darkness is light to him. Think that through. I can't get any stronger than that. Someone has said, self-love is a disease which includes all others. In other words, all other diseases. So self-love is such an enormous disease, it contains all other diseases. Self-love is a sin that includes all the other sins. The more lovely one is in his own eyes, the more loathsome he is to God. You see, there is a religious self-love. The self-centered person makes his own I, I'm talking about personal I in quotation, the center of his thinking, willing, feeling, and doing. It's what I think. It's what I do. I feel this way. I will do this. So there it is, folks. Now let's pause a moment. There is a justifiable self-love, and there is an unjustifiable self-love, according to the Scriptures. So you have to look at this subject in its entirety. Let's do that for a second. Self-love does not refer to justifiable love. We're told in Ephesians 5:28 and 29, men ought to love their wives as their own bodies. Their own bodies. Unjustifiable love, self-love, is expressed in the following statements that we're going to study. They all flow from self-love. Every one of them. All the other 17. You see, that's why it gets so big and so important a subject. Unjustifiable love is the cause of hard times that you and I are facing, and they will continue to get worse. Yes, within professing Christendom. Unjustifiable self-love often causes men to follow Christ for His blessings. Watch what I'm saying. For His blessings, while they reject God's government. Unjustifiable self-love is often the principle that first excites the flesh, then puts fervor to prayer. Unjustifiable self-love is often active in religious activity for personal recognition. That's why some love recognition. And that's another compound word. Wanting the preeminent place. And Phyllis is used with it, the adjective, with another word. And you'll find it in 2 John. I'll say, folks, that all the problems, I would say 99% of all the problems I've had to encounter in my Christian life, in my Christian ministry, has been over one sin. That's someone wanting preeminence, desiring something for which he is not qualified. Unjustifiable love is never willing to empty oneself of personal recognition for the honor and glory of God. Now, folks, what I'm giving this morning, if I were to give this to a congregation that I had never seen before, or had never spoken to, I would probably be tarred and feathered before I got out. If they didn't literally do it, they would wish they could do it and get by with it. I know what I'm talking about. Think it over. So we have a compound adjective to begin with. Philos and autos. Self-love. That is at the foundation of all problems. And all other sins spring from it. Now let's look at the second. So Paul says, for the people shall be self-lovers. Now, money lovers. That's the next one. That's the next word. What is the word? The adjective is philargura. Philargura. Philos and argyros. Argyros is the word for money, and philos is the adjective speaking of love. Literally, it means for any form of exchange. The word money, argyros, means any exchange. I tried to dig into this to find the root of this, and I finally came to the conclusion it's any exchange. Any exchange. It's translated covetousness in the King James. I'm not going to translate it that way. It's just money lovers. Self-lovers, money lovers. So money lovers is the moral corruption that follows falsely directed love. Self-centeredness and personal or material advantages become the chief objects of affection. But let's look at some things here in connection with this. Self-love is barren of grace. One may as well expect a crop of corn on a barren rock as a crop of grace in a covetous, money-loving person, where that takes all of his time and energy. When we think about money lovers. That is found in the area of commerce, if you want to enlarge on it. I can't take the time to do it, but I want to mention these things, because I've looked at it from these points of views, and I've done some research. Not only found in the area of commerce, but in the area of industry, in the area of legislation, in the area of literature, folks. I said literature. You know why a lot of people write books? Make money. Folks, I'm so thankful that I've never had a desire. You know, we've sent out about 1 million books, and that means if they were bought on the market, take them all, that would be about $10, $11 million worth. Literature. So watch all the books that are going to be written on the O.J. Simpson trial, not only by Simpson, whoever he chooses to be his ghostwriter, or the lawyers, both defense and prosecuting, reporters and what have you. They'll be making movies and everything else. So I'm talking about money lovers. It's found in the area of commerce, industry, legislation, literature, ambition. And folks, I'm not going to leave religion out of it either. I said religion. If self-love is the prevailing form of sin, money loving may be regarded as the prevailing form of selfishness. Church membership is often covetousness. The person covets some personal gain. I've even had people to join a church of which I was pastor. They don't do it now because we're too small. So if somebody has something to sell, he doesn't want to fool with us, but we're too small to begin with. But I can remember at Belford, we had men who would, if they're selling insurance, they want to join our church, and then they had the gall to come the next week or go to the church secretary and want a copy of the church roll. And then they would start at the A's and start visiting, trying to sell insurance. Boy, when I'd hear about it, I'd face them and I'd tell them I wouldn't permit that. In fact, I would call their name from the pulpit if it was necessary, and they didn't stay long. And you know what they would do? Well, I have checked up on some. They'd just hop in from one church to another. As soon as they would canvass all the people as members of one church, then they'd move over and join another church, and they would start with their membership. What about ambition? Ambition is often covetous. The solicitude of office or authority does not care who is hurt, just so long as the goal of ambition is reached. So, self-lovers, and the very next one is money lovers. And then you'll notice how he concludes these compound adjectives. Pleasure lovers, that's the way he concludes later on, more than God lovers. So notice the order there. What an outline for a sermon. You begin with what? You begin with self-lovers, and then money lovers, and the conclusion is pleasure lovers. Don't they all go together? But let's look at number 3. We have a noun this time, not an adjective, but a noun. Allodzonies. And that's the inflected form of aladzon. And it means arrogant, pretentious, or ostentatious. Boastful could be translated boaster. This word is also used in Romans 1:21 through 32. Some of these words are used in Paul's description of the people, including the homosexuals, and the Lord removing His restraint at that time. And the Lord is removing His restraint today to a great extent. And more we're seeing. So boasters are persons who are inordinately lifted up with high esteem and admiration of their excellencies and their accomplishments. You know what I'm talking about? I like what Lord Bacon once said. Listen to this. Quote, "The less you speak of your greatness, the more I shall think of it." End of quote. Men of greatness in history did not perpetually look in the mirror to make sure of their own greatness. So men of integrity are not continually looking in the mirror to make sure of their own size. Men's mouths full of their own praise signify hearts empty of grace. Full vessels, folks, full of grace, make little noise. The emptiest ears of corn stand highest. Men should labor for modesty. And folks, it takes grace to labor in that manner. Human boasting is vain. I read this, and I'll share the illustration with you. One fellow, to condemn boasting, came up with this parable. He said, the gourd that wound itself around a lofty palm tree said, quote, "I have grown as tall as you in fewer days than you count years." End of quote. The tree replied, "I know that very well. Every summer of my life, a gourd has proudly climbed around me as you. But they have all been as short-lived as you." End of quote. Folks, that's putting it right where it belongs. Let's look at the fourth adjective that Paul uses. The fourth one is a compound adjective. Huper aphanoi, or aphanos, comes from the preposition huper, which means above, and phino, the verb. And so we have the adjective huper aphanos. Means arrogant or proud. Appearing above others. You see, huper, the preposition meaning above. And showing off above others. You know, pride is so base a sin. Listen to this. This is not original with me, but this is a tremendous statement. Pride is so base a sin that even the pride or the proud themselves hate it in others. Think about that. Listen to this closely. Pride is so base a sin that even the proud themselves hate it in others. You know what I'm talking about? Have you ever seen someone who is proud and is always condemning another person for being proud? We're told in Proverbs 16, verse 18, pride goes before destruction. Let me give you a classic example of this. I witnessed this last week on TV. The defense team in California, they just knew after having Dr. Lee, the expert, to testify that they had the prosecutors running for cover. Well, last week, the last part of last week, the prosecutors had an FBI expert on footprint. And I listened to every word of his testimony. He's not through yet. They'll finish tomorrow. I'll listen to that. He annihilated Lee, the expert. And when Lee heard what had taken place, and of course he's in Connecticut, did you know that he called a press conference? And he said he will not. The defense lawyers had said that he said some things he did not say, which are true. And they were pointed out. I know what they are. And he said, I will not testify. I'll not be brought back to testify. I don't know if they can subpoena him to do it or not. But boy, they've got a job on their hands this week. What I'm getting at is this. Oh, the Bantam Rooster, Mr. Proud himself, walking around like a proud peacock, and he's had conferences. Folks, he was put where he belongs. Pride goes before destruction. He who is proud of his graces has no grace. Notice what I said. He who is proud of his graces, plural, has no grace, singular. Pride makes men objects of contempt. They slight God. Who is the Lord that I should fear His voice? And folks, we see this in religion today. I'm not a politician, but I'm using illustrations, folks. I'm trying to make what I'm giving practical. I'd listened to Colin Powell. I thought he would be a good role model for the blacks until last week. Folks, I'm not going to say, but you can think what you want. When he took the stand he took, he's a pro-abortionist. That's enough for me. I put him with all the rest of them. Did you know that Bush, the former president, really for him and behind him? Well, you know what I think of Mr. Bush. Anyone else who goes contrary to the principles of Holy Scripture. So pride is the fruit of ignorance in reality. Who can be proud in the life of man's total corruption? Whatever I am, folks, I am by the grace of God. So you have a compound adjective. Huperophanos. Let us look now, number 5, another adjective. Blasphemous. What does it mean? It means speaking against God, insulting, slanderous, curses of that which is, injuriously about another's good name. And folks, we hear blasphemy all the time today. Blasphemers, that word means persons who are slanderers, revilers, or speak injuriously about another's good name. I like what Bishop Moles said on this. He renders the word foul-mouthed, a mark of the loose language that abounds today. And when applied to Jehovah God, blasphemy means to speak of Him unjustly. It means to ascribe to Him acts and attributes which He does not possess. And that's why, folks, have no time for any person who says, "My Lord could sin." Absolutely no time. Do we really stand up for the Lord today? I'm sure this black man might not have known some of the technical terms. Talking about the black butcher last week. But when I laid it out, boy, he hit the ceiling. He acted exactly as I acted and reacted to what I heard the first time about Jesus Christ could sin. I was ready for a fight. To the finish. No one can speak against my Lord in that manner wherever I am, and I keep my mouth shut. Let's look at the 6th word. You see, we're not going very fast, and we have 18 of them. And then to close out this section, verse 5, which really is a message within itself. Number 6 is another adjective. What is it? Apostasy. Is the word, its inflected form is apostasy. Now, there's more than one word used here. Disobedient to parents. So you have the word for parent, and you have the word for disobedient. And apostasy means rebellious. Let me give you the verses where this particular word is used, this adjective is used. Luke 1:17, Acts 26:19, Romans 1:30, the passage we're now studying, Titus 1:16 and 3:3. Disobedience to parents is lack of parental respect. Folk, I've never seen so much of that as I'm witnessing today. This has been the crime of paganism in every age. Such disobedience was punished by the Jewish law with death. With the Hindus, it is attended with the loss of the child's inheritance. This sin reminds one of those in the daily newspaper, doesn't it? Now, this adjective comes from the verb which begins with alpha and then pytho, apatho, which means to persuade, convince, or win over. But it is negated by alpha, the first letter of the Greek alphabet. So it means unpersuaded, uncompliant, disobedient. So alpha negates persuasion. It negates obedience. It negates compliance. But today you can't spank your children, you know. And folks, they need it. A disobedient child needs the rod. But that's not politically correct. So let's face it, folks. We've got our job cut out for us. Disobedient to parents. It's getting worse, isn't it? It certainly has gotten worse in my lifetime. It certainly has gotten worse in my years of ministry. Let's look at number 7. Oh, but preacher, we're living in a civilized, highly educated age. Yes, I noticed that. Got a bunch of civilized idiots when it comes to biblical principles. Number 7. Archaristos. The plural is archaristoi. Unthankful. Now this is an interesting word. It is a compound word, by the way. In other words, it comes from alpha and charis. Now watch this, folks. Watch this. Unthankful is the way it's translated. So it's a Greek word that is used only here and in Luke 6 and verse 35. It means ingracious or ungrateful. But I went further than that. I wanted to go back. All of these words where I could trace back and find where they came from, I did that. So this one was an interesting one. I noticed I could see, knowing enough about the word charis, I could see in this word charis. And then I could see that it begins with alpha and is translated unthankful. So I said, we have charis negated by alpha. So I did some research on it. So it literally means, folks, it literally means without grace. Now think it over with me. Charis is the main stem. And charis is the word for grace. It is negated by alpha. And it's translated unthankful. But literally, it means without grace. So an unthankful person is without grace. That's the reason he's unthankful. It means he's void of piety. Void of piety. So it's used in Luke 6:35 and 2 Timothy 3:2. Now a slightly different word is used in Romans 1:21, but we're not going to that passage. I'm not teaching Romans this morning. So that's number 7. Interesting word, isn't it? Interesting word. Akaristos. Alpha and charis. Devoid of piety or without grace. Therefore unthankful. Does that mean more? Does that say more? Then let's look at let me give you the verb form before we leave it. The verb form is eucharisteo. Eucharisteo means give thanks, be grateful. And it is from the adverb eu, which means well, good, right, well done, and so forth, and charis. And charis. So it's made up of you and charis. Such persons are oblivious to any good of either God or man. They take everything for granted. I'm describing the unthankful person. I'm describing the person who is without grace. He's void of piety. Such persons have no need for God as long as things go well. But they use Him to accuse when things go badly. Don't you know people like that? I do. There are 3 usual causes for ingratitude upon a benefit received. Number 1, envy. Number 2, pride. And number 3, covetousness. Now let me explain those. Envy looks more at another's benefits than one's own. Pride looks more at oneself than the benefit. And covetousness looks more at what one would have than what he already has. We're going to go one more this morning. I'll try to get about halfway through this morning. Then we'll finish them and close out next Sunday with verse 5. Number 8, another adjective. And again, we have a compound adjective. It's made up of alpha and hasios. Hasios is the word for holy. And so when you negate it, you have unholy. Unholy. So, the word is, if you'll notice, anasios. So unholy persons have no reverence for God. Folks, that's true today among even most religionists. It's because they don't know the God of the Bible. They have a God that has been framed in their own imagination. They're totally wrapped up in themselves. Ingrown love for self. You see it working. So the Bible becomes a medium to unholy persons for what is imagined to be pornographic, funny, or hilarious. You ever notice when you're watching TV, when some reference is made to the Bible, a lot of times they laugh? Boy, I tell you, folks, when it comes to the book, and the book is quoted or some reference is made, it's not frivolous. And when I see people laugh and make a joke of things, I don't care if they're church members. Boy, I can write them off. I can write them off in nothing flat. See, they don't know these things. They do not know them. So we have a compound word, alpha and hasios. Holy, which is negated, therefore unholy. So hasios means holy, sacred, and refers to the blessings or promises. Literally means holiness. Let's look at number 9 and we'll stop with this one. Another adjective. And by the way, another compound adjective. Another one that begins with alpha, which negates what it's talking about. And what is this one? And this is a good place to stop. But I want to read you something in closing. I want to make it very practical for you this morning. And it'll be hard for you to believe what I'm going to read to you. Without natural affection is a way that astargoi is translated. And it's astargos. Astargos. Alpha and starge is the stem. What does it mean? Unfeeling? Unfeeling. So it denotes the want of affection in regards to a husband for his wife, or the parents for the children for the parents, etc., etc. Devoid of affection, which is natural. Which is natural. Now, without natural affection, see, it's negated. Let me read you something, folks. Let me read you something from China. And you know, our women and world women have just come back. And the First Lady has just come back from China. What do you think about fetal cannibalism? Is that natural? I'm here to tell you that homosexuality is unnatural. Lesbianism is unnatural. Abortion is unnatural. But listen to this. Human fetuses have begun to appear on the menus of Chinese restaurants as a delicacy and health tonic. Doctors take them home to eat. In terms of nutrition, a fetus would be a good source of protein, fats, and minerals. Eating aborted fetuses, this person says, is barbaric and shows what happens when a culture devalues human life. Now, I want to ask you a question this morning, folks. Are we very far behind? Now, I'm going to take it further than that. They're using parts of fetuses, and I call it not fetuses, but parts of aborted children, babies, breakfast. Used not only for an unborn child as well as it is used for one that has been born. Same Greek word, breakfast. What about taking parts of a child and using it as we're using it for medicine today, for cosmetics? What's the difference in that and the Chinese serving them on their menus at restaurants? Is that natural or unnatural, folks? Do we have our work cut out for us? I want to read you that one. Without natural affection, without natural feeling, devoid of affection. That's where we are today in America. It's worse now than it was 50 years ago. It's worse now than it was even 15 years ago. I wouldn't vote for any man running for the presidency of the United States who believe in abortion. That'd be enough for me. So I don't have to vote. I've already cast my vote. That's not to vote. These are sad days, aren't they? This is not easy to listen to. But folks, I love this portion of God's Word just as I love any portion of God's Word. It teaches me a lesson that is valuable for me, and therefore I love all of it, not part of it. Let's stand.